and welcome to the Etoft21sports Show for February 21st. How is everyone doing? My name is Eric. I'm the man behind Etoft21sports. We have a phenomenal show lined up for you today. My man, first time coming on the show, Caleb Keller from Fanduel TV. Him and I are going to talk some college basketball, look back at last weekend's slate of games, tell you some futures to lock in, and also some bets for later in the week. If you watched last week, you cashed Tennessee -2 over Alabama and ECU plus the 9.5 against Cincinnati. So look to keeping the winning streak going. Also, XFL is back. We were 3-1 in XFL on the podcast, which comes out Friday. So make sure to check that out. Also on the show today, Gino is going to tell you his horse racing bet of the day from over at Parks. Let's see what Gino has cooking for us at Parks tomorrow.
Wednesday over at Parks. Like always, head to drf.com if you ever need any help getting prepared for the races, handicapping, doing your research. I'm always using the DRF formulator style, past performances. In this particular race, race number 7 on Wednesday, I'm going to look at the number 6 Cajun Cousin. Looks like there's a pretty good amount of early speed in here. Down towards the inside, you have the biggest one who's really fast. You have Vitami from the inside who's quick. I think Excitable Lady wants to be pretty close. Continuing through the field, you also have Valuable Bree who wants to be forwardly placed. So I think it should set up well for horses coming from off the pace. You have a horse like Frame This and JJ Loves Billy. They're sort of stone cold deep closers. And then you have Cajun Cousin who can actually sit off the pace perfectly at a distance like this. She had a bad start last time out, but she recovered well. She just didn't really give her best. I think she's going to be sitting 3rd or 4th in here, and we could get something just like back on that November 28th race where she won by 6 coming from off the pace. She fits the conditions of this race very well. These are for runners who have not won a race since November 22nd or which have never won 4. Well, she's a 4-time winner, and she has won 2 races since November the 22nd. They qualify because they're at the slightly lower level. They're at the $7,500 level, not the $10,000 level that she's running at today. I like the 6 Cajun Cousin. If she's anything around 4-1, we'll make a win wager on her there. Good luck to everyone this week. Make sure to tune in to Eric's show each and every week for all the best information in sports. Good luck.
Guys, make sure you please give my boy Gino a follow at It's Me, Gino B on Twitter. I'm going to be coming back to his podcast on Friday to talk some NBA with the All-Star break over. Now, let's jump into some college basketball, and let's welcome for the first time on the show, Mr. Caleb Keller. Caleb, how you doing today, my man?
Eric, doing very well. I mean, this is the time of year where it gets to be my favorite season when we get close to March Madness. We got the Masters, we got the Kentucky Derby, all great things in spring. And don't forget March 12th, of course, the days get an hour longer.
Oh, I need it. I need that extra day just to get all the action in. Before we jump in, I need to ask you, did you see that 22-7 run by my boys, Michigan State, against your Hoosiers? I do believe you're a Hoosier fan, my friend.
Yeah, you better believe it. I was going to wear IU today, but if I speak anything good, then they're just going to call me a homer. But, Michigan State, they were knocking down shots here from the outside, and obviously they have a lot of energy in the building with everything that's happened, and I was really impressed with the way they were shooting the ball this party there from triple.
Now, before we jump into everything, I brought up Indiana, and I was on Indiana a couple weeks ago when they played Purdue. And I thought that was a good time to get into the future market, Adam. Actually, Bobby is asking this right now. Could Indiana make a run? I locked them in. I think I got them at like 45-1 a couple weeks ago, right before they played Purdue, because they're starting to get healthy. As a fan, do you see them being able to make a run?
Absolutely. And I think that the most underestimated part of Indiana this year, Eric, is it has been abominable to watch Indiana for the last 5 or 6 years, especially when you're supposed to be known for a state of shooting the basketball. And if you look at the last 5 years, 3-point percentage, they've been like 321, 308, 226, like numbers like that. This year, they're 15th. And took this, I think the first year with Mike Woodson, they were like 150. Now they're 15th, and they're super elite on percentage. But here's the thing. They don't shoot the three much. They're like 351 on 3-point attempts. So them going through Trace and Jalen Hood-Schifino has had more confidence than any freshman guard that we've had in maybe my life. And I haven't been, of course, queuing up the wagon for a long time, but this is the first time that you can hitch the wagon to the Hoosiers.
And I think Woodson's in-game adjustments, having that NBA game, I think he's able to do stuff that past coaches, no offense to Miller and Sampson and who you guys had, I think he brings a little bit more to the table X and O's wise than you guys have had in a couple years.
Totally agree. And you look at Michigan has the other NBA experience in the Big Ten, but like Juwan Howard's kind of struggling to show that he's worthy of that. And Phil Martelli was really calling a lot of the plays for Michigan. So if you look at that, then you get to Mike Woodson as the guy who has the NBA experience. And the biggest trend I've seen with the Hoosiers in his first 2 years is that basically every single game they have a run where they have at least a 10-point run over 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 12 minutes. And they've actually had 3 games in the first 2 seasons that they've lost that they had a 20-point run. They were up 20 at Wisconsin, they were up 20 at Iowa, and they had another 20-point where they had a huge run early. So when his X's and O's are working, they really work. Archie Miller never had any runs. There was never any time where Indiana could make a 10-point run.
I like Indiana a lot. Now, your guard, who's of course name I'm spacing on, he should be coming back soon, right? I'm spacing on the guard's name.
Xavier Johnson?
Exactly. Do we know a timetable for him to be back yet?
I think they said he's going to come back for the last 2 games of the regular season, which would be the game after Purdue this weekend. And I think that, Xavier was one of the most improved Indiana players from game 1 to the final game of the season that I've seen. Oladipo was probably the most improved within his time in the program. But I could argue that Xavier Johnson last year, he had a hitchy, bad-looking shot that was off. He was wild. By the end of the year, I don't know what shot doctor came, but he had a nice smooth release. He was hitting threes. He was being a leader. Lots of assists to no turnovers. So if he can be close to what he was, that's the most I've seen a Hoosier improve in probably at least 10 years in a season.
Yeah, I mean, as a Spartan guy, I am jealous because even though we may win tonight, I know come March, your team is way more capable of making a deep run than my guys are. And I'm actually invested in your guys. So I love them. I'm looking at it right now. They're about at 22, 25 to 1 on most books. Do you think that's too low, or do you think that's still enough value on them?
Who's kidding who? No price on a Big Ten team's good right now. If you haven't won the championship in 20 years, how could anybody be fired up to play any number? I think that 25 to 1 is going to give you a great run, but having a great run and getting your heart broken is different than actually cashing in the ticket that you were the best team. So I think Indiana's run worthy, and I wouldn't put it past them to have the confetti come down. But the Big Ten, 20 plus years, how could you be confident?
Now, we had an interesting slate of games last weekend. What was one thing that kind of stood out to you from last weekend's slate of games?
My biggest takeaway is going to be TCU, because if you look at TCU at face value, you're like, okay, they're 5-9 in the last 14, and if you look at their KenPom, their 3-point percentage is really bad. Okay, so what's to like about that? Well, you look a little closer, and 6 of those 15 games, they didn't have their star guard, which people know Mike Miles really is the heart and soul and the key. And a lot of those games were very close losses. And what I've learned in looking at the bracket, I don't look at the worst performances of the year. When you handicap a team, look at their absolute ceiling, because the tournament's so great because it sets you up to give a ceiling performance. And in my mind, TCU's got the best win of anybody in the nation when they absolutely hounded Kansas in Fog Allen. We saw Kansas score by 30 in the second half. So they dominated Kansas with a straight face with Mike Miles. And now that he's back, the 3-point percentage, at first I'm like, ooh, that's not good. And then I realized they don't shoot threes either, kind of like Indiana. They pound you to the cup, and they've got really sizey guys. And last year, they had Arizona beat in the second round to go to the Sweet 16. And Eric, I'm telling you, my favorite sneaky hidden stat for the tournament is on KenPom. It's called minutes continuity. And I scrolled down and looked under personnel because I was curious. And as I look back, basically it's a stat that measures how much the team has played together on the court. And the highest ever rated minutes continuity in the whole history of the program was number 5 seeded Butler in 2010 when they about beat Duke. And if you look at last year, one of the highest teams was Richmond, who beat Iowa. One of the highest teams was St. Peter's, who we know what they did. And TCU last year was 308 in minutes continuity, and this year they're third which is the biggest leap that I've seen. So with Miles, with the best win of the year, with the great minutes continuity, coming out of the best conference, and TCU put up 100 on a pretty decent Oklahoma State team, that was my sneaky takeaway of the weekend.
And they also have my boy Lapkin. They have the guy that can protect the rim. They're one of the top 10 teams protecting the rim, and they don't give up many second chance points. I absolutely love them. Them and Creighton were my first futures last year that I locked in. I absolutely love TCU. I agree with you 100%. And they're able to get a lot of free buckets in transition a lot. They're one of the best, if not the best team in transition. My first takeaway, North Carolina is done. I know a lot of people are saying they can just kind of turn it on and get into the tournament. They're a fade for me the rest of the season. I'm going to fade them when they get in the NIT too. Babcock is clearly hurt, and it looks like he's just kind of regretting coming back for the season. Plus, from what I'm hearing, the rumors between Davis and Love are true. And we've seen this this happened to my boys, Michigan State, about 10 years ago. When something like that happens, that completely tears a locker room. In my eyes, this team is done. They're just waiting for the season to be over. And it wouldn't surprise me if we see Bird or Oates coaching North Carolina next year. Because I think if they don't make the tournament, Hubert Davis is out of a job.
I mean, they're for sure in the conversation for the most disappointing ever, number one on the cover of a magazine. And weirdly, if you look at like the Tampa Bay Buccaneers when they won the Super Bowl, and they did the absolute most rare thing in sports, and they literally brought every single person back on the squad, on the personnel. And with North Carolina making that great run last year and bringing literally every single player back, one thing about North Carolina is every year you got to love the tournament because one guard is going to lose it and they're going to make every shot. And last year it was Caleb Love, and the year before it was Johnny Juzang from UCLA. So they had that guy, the flamethrower, and working off. They were playing great to beat Duke twice and to take out Krzyzewski. But it's crazy to think that they were number one preseason and they don't have any quad one win. Kansas has 14.
It's just it's dumbfounded what is absolutely happening in Chapel Hill. Do you have another takeaway from last weekend?
I thought that some blue bloods are starting to assert earlier in the week. I'm going to get to this one later on, but Gonzaga threw up 100-piece against a pretty decent Loyola, and then Kansas really stepped on Baylor to outscore them by 29 points, as good as Baylor felt in the first half. So, this is the time of year where belief in history and years and decades of belief, and you feel it from the crowd, like belief and pedigree and programs are taking over, and Kansas and Gonzaga look like that late in the week.
And I have a note about Kansas I'll talk about later, but they've kind of changed the way they're playing a little bit, not relying on the three-pointers, getting to the rack a little bit more. And Gonzaga, I think they're just kind of, I don't even know the term, like the sleeping giant. I feel like they're just kind of waiting for the dance to get there. And then a team like that, I feel, is going to turn it on and take that next step. Bob chimes in again. Nice call on Nova earlier. Do you think they could make a run at the Big East tournament? Now, Villanova is tough because we talked about TCU with Miles being out. Villanova's been without Moore. I think this is about his fifth game back earlier tonight against Xavier, and he's looked better and better and better each game. One of the sites I use is Shot Quality, and it kind of looks at percentages teams do for positive and negative regression. And Villanova is one of the teams that's due for the most positive shot regression from three. I think this team is interesting, but I don't think they could win the Big East tournament with Creighton, UConn, and Marquette having to win, probably beat two out of those three teams to win it all. I just don't think they can do it.
Nova, I don't know if we're getting to another comment, but Nova has, they're trying to hold it together late in the season, but Nova didn't have the gracious move forward like obviously North Carolina did. Yeah, North Carolina was like the baton handed off nicely to Hubert Brown, and then he goes on this amazing run. And we see a lot of the battalion handoff for the first year. Like, let's say with Tubby Smith won at Kentucky his first year, or Kevin Ollie won in his first year, or even, Bruce Weber at Illinois, that was a team that Bill Self had created. So we see this a lot, but the question is 2 and 3 and 4 years. And that's why North Carolina's hit a big 2-year hump. But Duke didn't really go into the battalion handoff very well, and definitely not Villanova. So, I mean, that's going to be a concern long term when you lose a coach like that.
Now, can Marquette win it all? I say no. I just don't think they have the size that they're going to need to get enough rebounds. And when you play a team like TCU, a team like Gonzaga, a team with some size, a team like Kansas, team even like Texas A&M, which lives on second chance points, I just don't think they'll be able to keep teams like that off the glass.
I mean, when I look at the Big East, Eric, I look at the Big East and the ACC, and I just don't think that the champion can come from one of those conferences. I just haven't seen enough from them. Now, maybe Creighton has gotten healthy and become everything that people thought that they would be. There are some Big East. I think that maybe Creighton would be at the top of the list. Virginia, I just don't think – I think that Virginia – this might be the best Virginia team in terms of sharing the ball that Tony Bennett's had, and they're pretty good at three-point. But I still just – they're not anywhere close to the Virginia team that won a few years back. So I just haven't watched as much of the ACC and the Big East this year because the Big 12 is loaded, and my team's in the Big 10. And the Pac-12 is pretty decent, and they're on late. So I've kind of – those are the ones I'm going to have to catch up on, those conferences, more when I get to the bracket.
Now, my second takeaway, I'm going to the Big Ten. I'm going to the Buckeyes. What happened to Ohio State? I was completely dumbfounded when I looked at this. They haven't won a game since January 21st. They got out-rebounded by Iowa. And when I dug into it, they just had a couple one-and-dones that were gone. The role players that are coming in that are freshmen are counted on to produce in a role they shouldn't be producing on. They don't have that alpha in the lineup that can get other people involved that we see the other teams in the Big Ten have. And it wouldn't surprise me if they move on from Holtman if they don't win another game. They have 4 games left. Penn State, Illinois, Maryland at home, and then Michigan State. They could easily lose all 4 of those games. And if they do that, I think they're going to move on from Holtman. And I think that's going to be a mistake if they do that, because a guy like that, I think, can have success at Ohio State.
Well, I agree that it would be a mistake to move on from Holtman for 2 reasons. Number one, when you look at Purdue, the one thing you have to give Purdue credit for is that there was not 1 but 2 losing seasons that Painter had. And that was after the Robbie Hummel, Etuan Moore squad. So the fact that they were willing to get through those 2 lean years and get now to number 1 in the country and probably should have gone to the Final Four last year. Holtman's had too much consistent success, and they paid him too much money to leave Butler to Nixon after this year. I look at this year for Ohio State, and I see bad chemistry. I see a little bit of Indiana when they had Romeo Langford. You got a star freshman, Sensabaugh, that obviously is going to go to the pros after this year. And it's like, they're not good, but then he's not the most intense guy, but you can't blame him because he put up 23, but he's not fitting in. It's just like Sensabaugh, as talented as he is, and he might be good for somebody in the NBA, it hasn't been a good fit for Ohio State.
Yeah, they've been brutal this year. And I really feel like if they had some of the guys from last year, of course I'm spacing the kid's name, he plays for the Nets. If they had him there and all this pressure wasn't on Sensabaugh, he was like the 2, I think they would be a lot better than where they are now. Now, what we're going to do now is we're going to flip over. I made this statement, and obviously, we had big news today with the Miller news coming out that he was involved in that tragic shooting. We're not going to touch on that. We're just going to state that. We're just going to move on. But my statement was this. I said Alabama and Tennessee would not make it past the Sweet 16 last week. And this is my reasoning. Teams in SEC play are only shooting 21% from threes against Alabama. And their whole offense, which I'm not a fan of, is just dribble drive to the hoop or pull up from 3. They really don't have that movement, that post play, which I think you need in the tournament. And when you play a team like a Virginia, San Diego State, Boise State that can pack it in, I really think they're going to have a hard time. Tennessee, I feel they're limited offensively. And teams are shooting 26% on wide open threes. That means no one's within 3 feet of them, and they're missing a 3 per shot quality. I just really feel that with how the tournament is, you're going to play that team that has that guard that can knock down a three. And once they play a team that shoots threes, I think they're going to be easily exposed. Am I crazy thinking that Tennessee and Alabama aren't going to make it to the Sweet 16?
I don't think Tennessee's scaring anybody, but I think that Alabama, their one word I would describe them is scary, because of the athletes that they have, and apparently because of everything that happens off of the court. But the thing about Alabama and Houston, 1 and 2, what makes them such an interesting 1-2 right now is that they're on polar opposite ends of the spectrum. So Alabama, number 1 in tempo, not like 6 in the 99th percentile, or not like 12 or really, no, they're number 1. And if you look at as of a couple of weeks ago, I think it might be 2 right now, but basically they're the fastest team. The other 9 teams, when I looked in that top 10 that were in the top tempo, they stunk. It's a gimmicky way to play. And when I look back at the last 12 champions, their average tempo is 180, which basically dissects 360, which makes total sense. They can play slow, they can play fast. Yes, Virginia finally cut the mold as they were the slowest team, but their margin for error was like this. They were down to Gardner-Webb in the first game. It took a miracle to beat Purdue, miracle to beat Tennessee. It took a miracle against Auburn, and the championship game took a miracle to go to overtime. So when you play super slow like Houston or super fast like Alabama, you don't have any room for versatility.
Yeah, I didn't even think of that point. That's a really good point. How do you feel as Notes as an in-game adjuster, if you will, like an in-game on the fly adjust what's going on?
I think that he did a lot at Buffalo. I think he's a great coach. I think that he's running into a problem right now. Like, I was thinking about what happened with Miller, and this is getting really bad now. It looks like the season should, to some degree, derail for the number 1 team right now. You got a shooting, and now you got co-conspirators. But when I look at, let's say, the Raiders, even for the Raiders standards, over the last, how many guys they had get in really bad trouble? Like, we saw that Josh Jacobs had a DUI, and when they got Marshawn Lynch, he had a DUI, and then we saw what happened with Henry Ruggs, and then they traded up to, or they prioritized Lynn Bowden from Kentucky in the draft. He was so hard to deal with, he couldn't even stay on the Raiders. And then you realize the guy making these decisions, John Gruden, well, he's not high in character. So how would he either know who was high in character or prioritize that for what he's looking for? And now I look at Nate Oates, bro, you've got 2 young guys on your team, and this isn't just any player. Miller, if this didn't happen, he could be the first college player off the board. That's on you. These things don't just, and then he comes out with the comment, wrong place, wrong time. It looks really, really bad for Bama.
Yeah, and like, you don't know this about me. That's what I do. I work with kids. I coach kids. That's kind of what I do on my side. And that's the comment that pissed me off the most, is wrong place, wrong time. I thought that was a very poor comment and shedded a lot of a light on them. And you're right. I mean, we could easily see the season just completely derail from Alabama. Now, I have this stat for you, and I'm going to list some teams. We'll kind of go through them and tell them about the futures. The last 20 years, teams that have won national championships have had an offensive and defensive efficiency, when you add up the 2 numbers, that are less than 50 and are top 25 in adjusted offensive efficiency. Teams that fit that are Houston, Bama, UCLA, Purdue, UConn, Kansas, Texas, and Virginia. Let's just go through them. Houston, what are your thoughts on Houston?
It's meant to be. The Final Four is in Houston, and Houston's got this juggernaut, and Jim Nance is from Houston, and when the confetti's coming down, he's going to say, Houston, we have a title.
So I don't know. Like, I think like the whole smaller conference, lack of close game, level of competition. Me as a coach, I look at it like this. I want close games because I want my guys to be in that situation. I don't want them to have that deer in headlights look that first time they have that situation, if that makes sense. Do you feel like that could hurt them? Or since they have
no, not this team, because this team has faced a monster preseason schedule and played like Virginia and Alabama, and like they have way more recent class in the tournament last year, plus their loaded preseason schedule, that they've played Titan matchups. I do think that your Ken Palms and your Torviks, the computers, the one thing that they can't understand just yet is how to factor in strength of schedule. Because every year, Gonzaga, a small conference, or Houston, or Wichita State, or going back to Memphis, like the computers are always going to really love a team like Gonzaga that's playing a lot of Pacific and San Diego. So that's one thing that they're going to be giant in the computers. But this team in the flesh, I think, could live up to the computer ratings.
Bobby chimes in, thoughts on Sampson. I'm assuming what he means as a coach. In-game coach, what are your thoughts on Sampson?
Sampson's really good. He was there my freshman year at Indiana, and similar to Alabama, there was something that happened where the violations about too many cell phone calls happened like at this time in the season, mid-February, and shoo, they could have been a number 1 seed. They ended up being a number 8 seed, losing by 20, and then everybody left, and then Tom Crean started over from absolute scratch with walk-ons. But Sampson is a great coach, X's and O's, and there's 2 different ways to look at their Elite Eight game last year to Villanova. They were atrocious from 3. With under 10 minutes to go, the Houston Cougars, with a chance to go to the Final Four, had 29 points. But they still went 1 for 20 from 3, and with a minute to go, it was a 2-point game. So if they would have just been bad from 3 for 20, 15%, then they still would have been able to get to the Final Four. So 2 ways to look at it is either how in the world did you have a chance to win that game while a record worst performance shooting, but then you're like, dude, you had 29 points and you were 1 for 20 from 3. That's not anywhere close to cutting it.
Yeah, I'll be the first to admit I had Nova in that game, and if Houston just shoots anywhere near what their matrix, their number, I mean, they're winning that game, and they're going to the Final Four next year. Bama, we already I kind of feel it's hard to talk about Bama with the Miller situation. You know what I mean? Like that's an elephant in the room. We really don't know. So let's skip over Bama. Now, I have a strong take on UCLA. I'm interested to hear your strong take. What your take is on UCLA.
I think that you look at the preseason magazine, and there's only one team that had 2 top 10 nationally ranked players in Tiger Campbell and Jaquez. So the experience that they have, I still think that was a miracle run with Juzang. I mean, Juzang was shooting it felt like 70% from the field. And that was a really close game in the first 4. And they were, they kind of were on a dream run. I think the Pac-12 is capable from what they showed 2 years ago, but I'm still a little skeptical that a Pac-12 team can go the whole way.
My thing with UCLA is this, their lack of 3-point shooting. Do they have someone that can knock one down when they need it? And they struggle when teams are good defending the pick and roll. You look at all their losses this year, all those teams were top 10 defensively defending the pick and roll, and they defend on that so much with Tiger. If they play someone that's good defending that, can they get enough buckets? And we saw it last year with Akron, and I had Akron at plus 1,600 to straight up win that game. I am still pissed off that they didn't win that game. But when you look at it, teams that play slow, control the tempo, and are good 3-point shooting, like Akron was last year, which like a 15 seed is going to be, they're going to be on a 2 per bracket matrix. I think they could struggle against a team that does something like that. So I'm just not high on UCLA this year just because of the way they play.
I think that Arizona's scarier. Arizona, to me, is if there really was going to be a Final Four breaking down to the door and maybe getting to the championship game, I think that Arizona, in my mind, scares me more to make that run than UCLA.
Oh, I agree 100%. 100% with the guards that they have. I totally agree with that. Now we're going to go to the Hoosiers' rival, Purdue. I'll let you take this. What do you think of Purdue? Do you think they could make a run?
I think that last year Purdue had sneaky bad chemistry, and it wasn't really publicized, and there was no stories or rumors. But when you think about how they played on the court, Jaden Ivey, his best 2 strengths were taking a hard straight drive to the hole or a one-on-one pull-up. There really wasn't a teammate needed for either of those actions. And then one thing about Matt Painter, he's always had at least 1, usually 2 7-footers, but they're never on the court at the same time. And Purdue already had an established front court guy that, was maybe like potential first team all Big Ten, but then Edey took his spot. And all of a sudden he's been there. He's coming off the bench. And Jaden Ivey's getting on the pub, but he's not really playing with teammates. So this year, especially early in the season, to crush Duke and Gonzaga, they had better team chemistry, and these freshman guards could play. But the big problem is, when you look at the big 7-footer in the tournament, have they not been the easiest outs in the tournament? Oscar Tshiebwe goes out in the first game last year to St. Peter's. Kofi Coburn had a couple chances, went out early. Even Chet Holmgren or scoring Luka Garza. Or speaking of Arizona, if you go back to when they had DeAndre Ayton, that team as a 7-footer, they blew through the Pac-12 tournament and they got crushed by like Buffalo. The 7-footers, for whatever reason, a tournament team can figure you out.
That's a great point. I was actually at last year the game. I'm outside of Chicago. Last year the games were up in Milwaukee. Me and my buddy went up there and we're watching Purdue against, was it Harvard or Yale from the Ivy League? Whatever. I think it was
Yale.
Harvard. Yale got there. And they played them the first round. And we're watching this game and we're like, this is the one team that doesn't look like a team at all with Purdue. Just the way they're acting in the timeouts and everything. So I agree with you 100% with that key team chemistry with last year. My thing is offense struggles with no Edey, and when their guards are applied pressure, they have a tendency to turn the ball over, and they're freshmen playing in the tournament. That's my worry point with that. So
North Carolina has been a tough out in tournaments over the last decade, obviously, but they always were like leading the country in offensive rebounds. And to no surprise with Edey, they are leading the nation in offensive rebounds. So yeah, even if the freshman guards get a little cold, they're gonna have plenty of chances because, like almost a third of misses, they get to shoot it again.
And one guy I played ball with growing up made a great point. He said in all his years, he has never seen anyone in the college game tougher to officiate than Edey.
Well,
what do you think?
Speaking of officiating, I mean, this is a quick little tangent. I know we're both Big Ten guys, which, by the way, quick little score check. Oh, wow, Mr. State's looking good. I'm Indiana rebound, but I'm happy for you all. Okay, so you look at the Big Ten. Why in the world has it been all the way back to your Mateen Cleave Spartans since they've won the championship? Well, I think a small reason is, or actually a big reason, is that they blow the whistle on every play. So what happens is now these guys can never build their fitness to have an actual up and down burst for a solid 3 to 4 minutes. No, it's always 30 seconds and here's a foul. 30 seconds and here's a foul. So it disrupts the game, and everybody knows that once you get to the tournament, they swallow the whistle. So then Big Ten teams are down 4 and panicking like Iowa and fruitlessly driving to the basket and hoping to get the foul, which always gets called at Carver Hawkeye Arena, and now it's not happening. The officials, there's a trickle-down effect of how the officials blow the whistle on every time down the court in Big Ten games, and why the Big Ten is not winning championships.
That's a good point. I never thought of that like that. That's because you're right. Like in those tournament games, they tend to swallow the whistle. They don't want those kids going to the line. So that's a good point. I never thought of it like that. And probably the best college basketball team ever, that 2000 Mateen Cleaves, Mo Pete, Charlie Bell, Antonio Smith, probably the best team, one of the best teams ever. Next team. Now, I have to admit, I am a little vested in this team at 45-1. UConn. My thing with them is they're just not consistent enough. This team is high floor, low ceiling, and we just don't know what we're going to get with them. What do you think of UConn?
I think that they've planted the seeds for a good future. I'm not buying as much stock as they've cooled off after the amazing beginning, but there was a little time of flux after, of course, Ollie took over for Calhoun, and it was this great thing, and they won another championship. But then, you've got a big dip, and that's very worrisome when you are a blue blood like that who's been great for like 2-3 decades. So now a Hurley showing that what he does is going to match in that Big East, and the fact that he's able to bring in, top tier Big East recruits. I like them going forward, and I'm kind of proud of UConn to right the ship. But I'm definitely worried that the conference doesn't look great, and they've been sliding for the second half.
Now, you mentioned Kansas before. What are your thoughts on them? Because they fit this criteria too.
Kansas would be the team out of this list that I would put the bet on, because all the teams I can try to find a little weakness, and I know that that's kind of part of when you get to the top tier, you got to be trying to find weaknesses. And Kansas, I see the least amount of weaknesses. And as a matter of fact, the one weakness that they did have was everybody saying, "Oh, well, their tallest guy is 6'7". They were playing, everybody's a hybrid, but we know that Grady Dick and McCullough and Wilson can score, and they got a point guard that runs the show. But when Indiana played them in December, and Kansas is blowing them out by like 20 at Fog Allen, and like with a couple minutes to go, they threw in this guy who's 6'11". They're like, and here comes Ernest Uday, who's a 5-star McDonald's recruit, and he was 6'11". I'm like, hold on just a second. This guy's on the team. That their team's so good with what they do, a guy's being just 6'7", that he doesn't play. So now I look back at the stats. Now this guy, the smart coaches know that you stash a freshman big, and that's why these guys every year. And now this dude, Ernest Uday, really talented, 6'11", long arms, and get this, he hasn't missed a shot since December 1st. He's 20 for 20, Ernest Uday. And I see, of those three scorers, McCullough, Wilson, and Dick, even if one has an off night, you got two other great scorers. McCullers underrated. You got two other great scorers. So even on an off night, it'd be insanely tough to beat Kansas.
I'm going to say this, and it hurts me to say this. Right now, I think Bill Self, because I'm not a Bill Self guy, I think he's probably the best coach right now in terms of pregame and in-game. I don't want anyone else besides Self doing that, because the in-game adjustments he makes are insane. And also, we've seen it the last 5 games. They're doing this thing. Everything was relying on the three-pointer. They're jacking up threes. And if Dick didn't get it going from deep, they're really struggling. But the last 5 games, everything's been inside. Wilson's getting to the rack. And they're playing lights out. That game against TCU yesterday, top shelf game. They put up almost 100, and I think they only had 2 3-pointers a couple games ago. Everything is interior. They're getting to the rim. If they're able to do this, I think they can easily repeat. I'm just worried they're going to regret to that jacking up pointless 3 after pointless 3.
I'd have a tough time disagreeing on Bill Self with Krzyzewski being retired and Roy Williams. And again, like we mentioned for a second earlier, don't forget that Bill Self was ready to build a championship at Illinois with Deron Williams and D. Brown and Luther Head. And then he took the Kansas job. And then like 5 years later, he did win a championship with Brandon Rush. And then he got another one. And now they could do it again this year. And how about this? When I was at the airport, what was this? I think it was about last year. I'm at the airport. It's like 6 a.m. And here comes this big, tall, blonde guy and this. And he's had a McDonald's All-American backpack on. And his dad had Kansas. I'm like, this got to be Grady Dick. So I did a quick little Google search and just went up to him, said, hey, real quick, asked if we could get a selfie. I told him to take it easy on my Hoosiers, which, of course, he didn't do. But he had a great family. It was cool to see Grady Dick and chat with him for a second at the airport at 6 a.m.
That's cool. That's really cool. It's cool when you run into these guys just totally unexpected. I will say this, like my buddy Dan wanted me to mention this. It was probably like 8 years ago. It was at Keelan. And I guess he was completely, we'll say, had a couple too many soda pop, and he went up to you, and I think he spilled a beer on you, so he wanted to apologize. He went up to like say hi to you at a bar at Keelan, and he spilled a beer on you. It was probably 8 years ago. You don't remember, but he wanted me to apologize to you for doing that, dude. About 8 years ago. So Dan says,
if it was a warm day, I could just ring it out, take a nice little drop there to get to the late double.
Next team, Texas. I'm not a big fan of this team. What do you think of Texas?
I mean, still, you look at any team from the Big 12 is viable. Losing your coach, you got to think there's no way you can lose it. You can win a championship when losing your coach, but still, they look strong. They always have a huge front court, but ultimately, I just think that the Big 12, I just can't see it. With everything that Alabama and Texas, this is not their year. This isn't football, first of all. You all have football. Alabama and Texas, you guys take football. But with everything that's happened for Texas and Alabama this year, I just can't see it and kind of don't want to see it, either of them winning the title.
Now, I love the site Bracket Matrix. It kind of lays out where they think everyone's going to go. They have Texas at 2. These are the 7 seeds. MSU, Maryland, Providence, and Iowa. I could see Texas losing to all 4 of those teams, especially if it's Providence. Especially if it's Providence. And
one quick thing on Providence. if you've seen Fanduel TV, Kurt Hoover. So Kurt loves college basketball just like us. But one thing about Kurt I've always appreciated is he analyzes the coach. Like a couple years ago, we were trading out one day on TVG2, and he's like, "Mate, I watched California last night." He said that coach is completely lost. He said, "Bet against California." That night, they lost to Chaminade. So he knows a bad and good coach, and Kurt has always told me he plays Ed Cooley like every time Providence is playing a game. And you look at their against the spread for the last 3 years. He's told me for a long time that that's sneaky one of the best coaches in the country.
I love Cooley, and Cooley's flat out said he tells his guys, "You have a 4-point game, and you get me to the 4-minute mark, I'll win you the game." That's what he tells his guys before every single game. You get me there, and I'll win it. I absolutely love Cooley. I think this team is actually better than last year's team, and they're still going to be on the 7 line, which is absolutely ridiculous to me. Last one, Virginia. What do you think about Virginia?
I like to look when you have a long-standing program like Tony Bennett's been there for 10 years. Okay, let's look at it for the context of the last decade. What are their strengths or weaknesses? The strength is this team shares the ball very well. I think they're leading the nation essentially in the amount of buckets that are assisted on. So they share the ball very well, and this team is pretty good at shooting the three. Definitely better than a couple of the last few seasons where it was a very big weakness for Virginia. Still overall, when I watch ACC highlights and games, I don't look at the court and see a champion out there. I think they're going to be tough. They're going to be a tough out for sure. But comparing them to the team that won the title, I feel like that team could beat this team by double digits.
And the point you made earlier, they had so many things break their way in that run. That crazy finish at the end of the Tennessee game, beating Auburn.
What happened in the Purdue game? That was like
the Purdue
the ball's
game
going
too.
backwards, pitches double. That was crazy.
I am a 28-1. I like Clark. He was their freshman guard on that team when they won it all. They have the experience. But when you just kind of look at it, I don't know. I don't know if they can make the run. One team I did want to get your opinion on. I locked these guys in over the weekend. San Diego State at 100-1, 17th in KenPom, 19th defensive efficiency, 47th offensive efficiency. Defense will keep them in the games, and they have this guy Bradley who can create points in crunch time and be that reliable scorer. I think in a year like this, when it's so wide open, I think we could see a team like San Diego State make a run. What do you think?
I think that Steve Fisher obviously built such an amazing, consistent pedigree built on defense. But, the coach that took over within his regime to take over the ship really has added some offense. And there's been times over the last decade where San Diego State had enough D. Of course, Kawhi Leonard played Kemba Walker in an amazing tournament game. They've been on the precipice of getting to a Final Four. And I don't think it hurts them that Nevada's pulled back. Musselman's at Arkansas. Nevada's decent, but they're not what they were. So, yes, they're playing in what looks like a weak conference, but don't tell them. All they know is that they keep on beating the teams that come to their building or that they go to. So they got a lot of confidence. They have more offense even than when Steve Fisher was there. So I could see maybe this being your – you've been thinking about it, San Diego State, for a decade. Maybe this is the year they do it.
Yes, Bobby, I do have Mountain West Conference bias. I was so high on Colorado State last year. They completely crapped out. I'm high on Boise State this year. I like Boise State to make the Sweet 16. I'm high on San Diego State. I don't know. I just love me some Mountain West. You like watching the Pac-12 lately. I like watching Mountain West Conference on CBS Sports Network. That's my go-to late night. Now, let's shift our attention over to the bets. We each have 3 bets lined up for later in the week. Caleb, what is your first bet?
All right, let's go Thursday, where Northwestern's on a career-defining run there for the program and having 5 straight wins. First ever time that they've beaten 4 straight ranked opponents. I saw Northwestern be up 20 at home against my Indiana Hoosiers, but I like Illinois on Thursday night against Northwestern. And one benefit that Northwestern has in the Big Ten, and I've seen it my whole time at Indiana, is that when they play a road game, you don't get the other crowd's fastball. Like, okay, Northwest. As a matter of fact, a lot of times the crowd's a little sleepy. Oh, it's Northwestern here, and they kind of play in a quiet gymnasium. Illinois lost to Northwestern earlier this year. This should be the most fired up Illinois crowd has ever been for Northwestern to come. Illinois still needs to play well. They lost like 85% of their shooting last year and scoring, but now Brad Underwood's got it going again. They have a tough interior of Meyer and Danger, who they basically both plucked from Baylor. This could be the time where they force Northwestern to shoot more threes. Northwestern has a tiny weakness on three-point percentage, and I'm expecting a great home team this year. Illinois, who hasn't been a good road team, now they get Northwestern at home, ton to play for. Northwestern's got the pressure on them. I'll take the Illini.
I absolutely love that bet. And you mentioned the interior. I think the big thing in that game is going to be the second chance points. Illinois is 41st in the country in second chance point offensive rebounds, and Northwestern is only 170th in the country in defensive rebounding. So I think Illinois is going to be able to take advantage of that size and get some second chance points. I absolutely love that. Plus, we need to remember these are college kids. Northwestern's ranked. I was trying to remember this before we started. When was the last time Northwestern was actually ranked in college basketball? This is a fade all over me. I love Illinois.
I got to give them credit for the season as a whole. Take out Thursday because their guards, Boo Buie and Chase Audiz, they play really strong. Boo Buie took it to the rack twice against Indiana to seal the game. I was like, whoa, both of those were amazing takes. And Chris Collins, I think that Northwestern never got too high of expectations. They got to the tournament and they had a big breakthrough. They had never gone. And then the last couple of years have not been great, but they didn't overreact. And Collins came back with a smart plan. They were predicted to be like 13th, and now they're second. But the fact that Northwestern stuck with Collins, they were redoing their stadium. They were playing like out-of-town home games. But I think that Northwestern has a lot to be proud of for their patience that they've kept.
Brittany chimes in. Hi, what up, Britt? The one thing about Northwestern is this: no NIL money. Absolutely not.
Huh. Wow.
No, and them and Stanford are the only two Division I teams that have no NIL money going in. So what Collins is able to do when you factor that in is absolutely amazing. My first bet, and I kind of have a theme here, it's Saturday. I'm looking to play Utah. The back-to-back trip from Colorado to Utah is brutal. Pac-12 teams are 40% ATS when Utah is the second leg. Utah better shooting from 2, better shooting from 3. Slower pace. They're going to be able to get more possessions, take advantage on the glass because of the 7-footer. USC isn't that good this year compared to years past on the glass. And USC also has Arizona on deck. So I think it's just a good situational spot to fade USC. I'll be looking to play Utah if I can get them at -4 or better. So I like Utah on Saturday. What's your next bet?
Let's go to Saturday, and I'm going to take the Arkansas Razorbacks, who I feel are ready to make another patented Eric Musselman run. And this is a tale of two freshmen. Obviously, I'm glad we didn't spend too much time talking about it, but even before the Brandon Miller issue, let's focus on the other freshman in this game. That's Nick Smith Jr. for Arkansas. And now that he's come back and the way he looked in the last game, I looked at an NBA mock draft a while back, and it was obviously Wembanyama. Can't wait to see who he goes to, number 1. But then 2, 3, 4, and 5 were all in the G League. And the first college player off the board was Nick Smith Jr. from Arkansas. And now he comes back into the fold. Eric Musselman, I feel like not purposely, but he never minds if they have a little losing streak to fire him up, or if they even get down early in the game because he's known for making Titanic runs. And when you look at Baylor a couple years ago, their road through the championship, they had all blowouts. They blew out Gonzaga by 16. They blew out Houston in the Final Four. They blew out and they were up 29-11 on Arkansas, and Arkansas got it back to 2. And then the next year, Arkansas beats Gonzaga and almost beat Duke. So it takes a titanic effort to beat Arkansas. And when I look at Alabama, they're going to want to play with pace, and they're going to be the favorite in this game, and they're going to be giving Arkansas some points. This is the time, though, where Arkansas is hungry to show that they could be an elite team. And Alabama wants to play up tempo, and Arkansas says, sure, we got Nick Smith Jr. We'll do that as well. So I really like the Razorbacks against Alabama.
You mentioned this, and like we were just talking about futures. You made a great point about Nick Smith Jr. I'm pulling him up right now. How do we feel about an Arkansas future?
Well, I took two futures to start the season, and it was Arkansas and Indiana. So those are the two that I've got right now. And what I like about Arkansas when you look at the metrics is their defense. They still really have a strong Ken Palm, Torvik, whatever you want to talk. They have a strong defense, and whatever that offensive number is, it's getting better with Nick Smith Jr. And they really can put the – it's so, 40 minutes feels so long against Arkansas, almost going back to the Nolan Richardson days, because you know they're going to make a huge run, and they go with the full court press, and they try to make as many possessions as possible. So I just look at every single year at Nevada, they got better. And now every single year at Arkansas, they've gotten better.
And I just want to thank you because I had 100-1 Arkansas future ticket that year they lost to Baylor. So I wanted to thank you for bringing up that memory while they got so close. They totally, totally could have won that game. I had Arkansas last week against Texas A&M. They had that big lead. They blew it, missed some free throws. Smith didn't play in the second half. And I really think Musselman is just kind of saving him until, the big dance, the March Madness and everything. So I think I'm going to look to play a little future on him if I can get 40-1 or higher, thinking about it out loud right now. My next one, I'm taking Colorado straight up and plus the points against UCLA. This game is on Sunday. UCLA back-to-back altitude trip. They play Utah on Thursday and then Colorado on Sunday. Teams in this situation, it dips down to 36% ATS. As I stated before, I'm not high on this UCLA team. They're very limited to the pick and roll offense. They don't get out and run, don't get many free chances in fast break points. They're playing their second game on the road in altitude. Colorado top 100 in fast break points. I think they're going to look to get out and run. You got kids in altitude that are going to get tired. I think Colorado's live to pull off the upset. I'm taking Colorado plus the points and straight up this Sunday against UCLA.
Now you're saying you're a Mountain West guy, but you giving us two Pac-12s with all these altitude angles. I don't know if I'm buying the Mountain West stuff.
I know. Well, I'm telling you what, like the Mountain West game of the year is next Tuesday with Boise State and San Diego State at 10. So I am so pumped for that game. Last bet of the show, my friend, for you.
All right, let's go to Gonzaga at home versus St. Mary's. And, St. Mary's has had their way in the conference for once, and they have a great freshman guard, and they got a great experienced guard, and, they're doing St. Mary's things. But when I look at Gonzaga, they really controlled that whole game at St. Mary's, and St. Mary's with a lifetime best crowd. By the way, I had a chance to go to a St. Mary's Gonzaga game back when they had like Kyle Wiltshire and DeMontis Sabonis. Joaquin, who works at Fanduel, he's a St. Mary's grad. So took the one trip up there, and it was amazing. 3,000-person pavilion. The place was rocking, but Gonzaga controlled that game. And give credit to St. Mary's and made some epic plays late, won it in overtime. But since then, St. Mary's has lost to LMU. They barely got past a bad San Diego team, and now Gonzaga puts up the 100 spot against Loyola. Loyola ended the 72-something game winning streak at Gonzaga, and Loyola beat St. Mary's. So they were the clear number 3. That game was at Loyola. Everybody was fired up, and it was like 100-50. So I've got St. Mary's on blowout watch. And one last thing about these two teams, it's always contrasting styles. St. Mary's is like 350 in the country, and Gonzaga is like 5. And my theory has always been the home team controls the tempo. So St. Mary's had all the confidence in the world, controlled the tempo, got lucky to win. Now Gonzaga's want to play upscale. I think that St. Mary's could get blown out here.
I was on St. Mary's the first game. Completely BS they covered. They had no business covering that game and obviously straight up winning that game. I felt Gonzaga controlled the tempo there, and I think they're going to be able to control the tempo even more playing in Spokane. I absolutely love the Zags there. It's going to be interesting to see what the number is. In terms of St. Mary's, before I get to my last bet, Ken Palm has them really high. Where do you think they could make it in the tournament? What's your expectation? Are we looking at another Sweet 16? Do you think they could make that Final Four run? Where's your head on St. Mary's?
I think that I think maybe Elite Eight. I can't quite see the Final Four, but St. Mary's has kind of perfected what a lot of teams try to do, which is the slow it down ball. And I watched St. Mary's against Indiana last year, and St. Mary's was up like 40. So I know more than anybody that when they get hot with how they play, it was like the best team I've ever seen, at least for that game when they drummed the Hoosiers. But I still think that the lack of interior size and the unwillingness to play the up-tempo game, they play first to 65. First team to get to 65 points wins the game, and sometimes they can do that against a quality opponent.
Yeah, they like you said, they mastered the slow it down, but I just don't think they can win multiple games like that, especially if they have to play like a Baylor and then what's a one team, like a Kansas back to back, like some, you know what I mean? Like I don't think they can do that back to back. My last one, and I'm going to the pit, and this is what I'm notorious for. Like it's like the old Christina Aguilera song "Dirty." Like I love like going to the pit, fighting the dirty thing, and it's tomorrow. I'm going LSU at home. This is just a selling point for me for Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt only 38% ATS as a favorite this season. This is a team I like to play as a dog. They've won 5 in a row. They lost to Alabama 100-47. They've won 5 straight. They just beat Auburn at home by 2. Per shot quality, they're due for some shot regression. And I just feel that they're playing at such a high level right now. They can only go down. And this is going to be like an 8-10 point spread with LSU at home. LSU has been looking better the last couple of games. I absolutely love LSU here. If I can get 8 or higher, I'm vested in them tomorrow, as awful as it sounds.
LSU kind of did a quick reboot. Like everything that was happening with the program and the coach, they could have gone to the drudges of the SEC, but they got into the portal and they held their name well. And I've been surprised how well they've held it together. Now,
Caleb, first time talking to you some hoops. I thoroughly enjoyed you. Oh my God, I'm looking at it right now. I may not be on LSU because I'm looking at the early lines on BetStamp. Take a gander what that line is.
Well, you were thinking 8, so I'm guessing it's a solid 4 or 5 points off from what you were thinking.
LSU is getting only 2 at home against Vandy. That does seem a little trappy. Interesting line. I was way off on that one. Way off on that.
It's like when you get a line that sounds great, the first instinct is that sounds too good to be true. That's the better mind.
Yeah. So I don't know. That I'm gonna see that one will probably fluctuate. Caleb, I'd like to thank you for coming on again. I apologize for my boy Dan spilling the beer on you. He wanted to make sure I said that to you. Why don't you tell everyone where they can find you on social media and what your Fanduel TV schedule is the next upcoming days?
So we're broadcasting from Santa Anita these days, at Caleb FanDuel, at Caleb FDTV. I switched that over as we made the switch from TVG to FanDuel. But, we've been with FanDuel for a solid 5 years now, and I think that it's right to go along with the sports betting revolution. And I can tell you, I've been with this company for 10 years. The first 5 at TVG were good, but the next 5 with FanDuel has been very impressive, the way that they run, in my mind, a world-class company. And then also, as I'm trying to get them look at this score. All right, let's let Michigan State take this by 10. But let me show you all this as well. Got a new business that maybe some of y'all would be interested in. So myself and Major League All-Star Paul LaDuca, we started a sports card business. And there's an app called Whatnot, and we spin the wheel. We've got like Willie Mays on here, Hank Aaron's, Tom Severs, Warren Spahn, give away autographed cards and packs and whatnot. But every Monday at 10 Eastern, we spin the wheel to see who's going to add these to the collection. PC and cards means personal collection, but for us, it stands for Paul and Caleb. So PC collects, and we got a little business on Monday nights going.
Cool. So is that Monday? What 10? What time zone?
10 Eastern on Monday. PC collects on the Whatnot app.
PC collects Whatnot app at 10 p.m. All right, I'm gonna check that out, my man.
And we put all the cards on the wheel, spin it, and just one time a week, Mondays at 10 Eastern.
Awesome. Guys, thanks for tuning in. We'll be back next week. Make sure you give my boy Caleb a follow. We'll talk to everyone soon.